Welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 246, we welcome to the podcast Reverend Dr. Martha Creek. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm here today in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 246 of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, I want to welcome you to a brand new week. I hope and trust that you had a great weekend, and we are now officially into March. I'm so happy be done with February, and off we go. I'm ready for the time change. I always get so worked up when the time changes. I'm like, oh, I don't like it. And then by the time, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for it. Bring it on.
Well, I'm not in a hurry to lose February. It's my birthday month.
I know. And it was a great birthday.
And it's also the birthday month of our guest, I have to say. I'm so excited to have a dear, longtime friend, colleague, just all around cool person with us today. Dave, tell our listeners who our guest is today.
The one, the only, the incomparable Martha Creek has joined us.
Welcome, Martha Creek.
Oh, thank you. If people look carefully, Cynthia Alice, they'll probably think we're cousins because we got a Southern accent. So
Exactly.
friends and colleagues for a couple of decades, going on 3 now, I'd say they may suspect that we're cousins after they listen a while.
We probably are. That's what's a little scary about this South. We probably are, most definitely. Well, it is a great day. And Martha, it's always great to have you along with us. I was thinking the other day that we met when we were both applying for ministerial school, or I think you applied just before I did. And I've so enjoyed knowing you over the years and watching your expansive journey and how really you have worked with people, with churches, with organizations, really all around the country in a variety of ways. I mean, we were talking the other day, and our listeners don't know, but you and I check in regularly. And it was so fun to hear a part of your history I knew nothing about.
Well, including even, if we look back over that ministerial path, honey,
Yeah,
and how it started, and this show, this podcast, and the way you're reaching around the world with this, and it could start right there with an authentic spiritual journey, and that how I went out there into that ministerial school believing, hell bent that was going to be my path and my way and my journey, and life, God, creator, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, went, no, this is not your journey. This is not your path. And talk about having to regroup, to stand there and say, okay, if this is not what I was hell bent on believing is mine, then what is my authentic spiritual journey? So here we are 20 some years later, having lived that out.
Oh, absolutely true. But I remember when I heard you speak, I had never met you before, and it was just these brief introductions. And I was sitting there thinking I was going to be in the next round, right? Because I just moved to Kansas City, and I was going to be taking some ministerial classes, or taking the classes rather, so I could apply. I'd only been in Unity about less than a year, and I just, left my entire music career. It was a bit of a jump, but I just was so guided to do it. But anyway, when I heard you speak, I said, my God, if they don't let her in, they're crazy. She is amazing. And I said, if she doesn't get in, I'll never get in. That was my thought.
Well, is that the first time you've ever been wrong?
Not at all.
Well, you can chalk that up one in case your listeners need to know that you made one mistake.
Just the one.
At least one.
That this was that she was going to get into that particular ministerial school, which she did not. And it's pure grace, and if we're looking at what is true, what is reality based, and what we believe we think we know, and the trouble with that, then we can all start right there again.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just interesting that was our first meeting. And yet in my ministry, over the years, a key supporter and leader of boards, of leadership is you. And so your job was actually more expansive than serving only in a ministry. And so it's like you say, this is the authentic journey. From the ego standpoint, that didn't feel good to not get in. But from spirit, looking at that from that higher perspective, it's like, well, there must be something else. There must
that
be.
was absolutely the truth. And, I've given thanks many, many times for that, because I don't think that I had enough authentic, developed, matured self back then, that if it had been offered to me, I likely would have taken it, because I would have, I didn't have enough differentiation of self to know that even though it was an internal no for me, like the minute that plane sat down in Kansas City, Missouri, it was the strongest, clearest no I've ever had.
Wow.
And I went right on through the motions, everything. I wanted to understand the process. I wanted to understand their functionality, and what happened. And it was a clear no, even before I got in there. And it's even the irony now, as I listen here with you, Cynthia, Alice, that you got in having only been in Unity a year. That's about how long I'd been in Unity. I'd started in religious science and already had a practitioner and ministerial license there. And part of the letter, they give a letter saying why you've not been admitted or accepted or whatever it was. It's called a redirection letter.
Redirect.
And it included because I hadn't been in Unity long enough.
Well, that's what everybody told me, that I would never get in because of that. And what was so funny is everybody that told me that did not get in. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It makes no sense what happens there.
Well, I mean, there's such a powerful lesson in this. I mean, many, including over years, I remember a young man. I was so struck by his wisdom, and we were kind of working through something, and he went, "Oh, it looks to me like, Reverend Martha, you're trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make any sense." And I remember that just struck me like from my head to my toe. Like, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And it's nothing but hell. It's like a pit of suffering to try to make sense out of things that don't make any sense. And we go wild egoically, as you use the word, the term there. Egoically, it goes wild, making up stuff, then believing what it makes up, and then building a story out of what it made up, and then correlating everything it made up to some other event, dredging the past, projecting it into a future, and then hi-ho, back to hell we go. Instead of, wait, I got to circuit break this baby somehow.
Yeah. It's funny you're saying this, because my part of my lifelong journey really has been trying to make sense of crazy. When you grow up in a dysfunctional household, which is everybody I know, let's just be real. And I think part of why I went down studying a lot of psychology and working the therapeutic path is I was trying to make sense out of crazy. And I worked real hard for a long time thinking if I could have just done something different, that this wouldn't have happened, that wouldn't have happened. And finally, I had this very wise therapist who had a lot of, what I would call just common sense wisdom. And she finally said, you just can't make sense out of crazy. That was her exact words. And I said, oh my God, you're right. It's like, I keep trying to figure them out. This is such wasted energy. And really, the energy needs to be on me and my journey and what's next and what is God trying to do in me and what lesson, not trying to figure everybody else out, but what lesson is in this for me and how do I move forward from here? Because that's enough right there to get everybody to stop listening. Because when most of us hear, oh, I've got some responsibility in this. Instead of trying to understand crazy or to get my family to be different than they were, it's like, oh, all my power, all the power in the universe resides in how I'm going to relate to this.
and what I'm going to do with what I grew up with and what I do with what happened in the household. And it's not for everybody to, to take that level of responsibility to say all the power lies within me for me to change my thinking and my mind about this, and for me to get some kind of spiritual groundedness and a different underpinning under this. And even to hear something like you say, like all households have a level of dysfunction. All households have that. And that if we're not careful, though, we enter that like it's a competition.
Absolutely.
We're going to one up everybody that's around. So,
right.
You ain't seen misery till you've heard my tale. Instead of let me relate to what the human condition has bared in their households. Yeah. And if we're going to compare it, then you won't hear much from people like you and me about what went on in ours when we step back and gain a perspective and see what went on, and not to diminish or invalidate the feelings we had about it either.
No, that's very true. Well, in the last, say, 10 years, I have really come to a real different place about all of that. And, I know on some level, I don't know how deep I want to go with this, but I'm just feeling this. On some level, there was some soul agreement for the experience I had this lifetime. And part of that agreement is how those experiences shape me to be able to help and support so many others. And when I think of what this podcast is doing around the world, I know that is not wasted. So I do have a much more expansive understanding of that than I did, say, 20 or even 30 years ago, most definitely. Age has brought some understanding, and also the spiritual works, a little bit of illumination about, well, I am really not a victim to life. There's some soul agreement. And in some cases, I was not overtly responsible, but covertly as I aged, but because I did not have an awareness of certain things. So I can see now, looking back, my soul journey, my development, my lack of awareness, definitely had impact in what happened. And that's not to blame myself. That's to say we're all souls on a journey, and there are parts I played. But now as I've developed, and I don't think I told you about doing this. This is several years ago. I was looking through a whole bunch of old pictures of my life, and I was really guided to just make kind of a collage. And I ended up finding one of those big frames that holds like 20 some pictures. And I put a variety of pictures from when I was about 2 till I was about 40 or whatever in this frame. And what was so interesting as I did that, I said, look at all these great things in my life. Look at, wow, it was like, yes, bad things happen, but it's gotten so far in it's like way in the distant mirror, it's like way back there. I remember it's there, but it's not impacting the way all these incredible experiences are at this point. When I went diving in Honduras, when I went to this incredible retreat in Colorado, when I was climbing this thing in Georgia, it was like, oh, wow, I love my life. It was like such a renewed perspective. And now that collage, by the way, is in my bedroom, and it's the first thing I see every morning.
Yeah. Well, bravo to you. There's such genius in referencing the past from a higher perspective.
Yeah.
And not to be blinded by those traumatic, painful times that we're absolutely then blinded to the joy, the grace, the mercy, and, even as I hear you refer to our soul's contracts or our soul's agreements or anything, regardless of what the listener wants to do with that, it can be summed up as what this was all on purpose. And there's so much said and written about purpose. I need a purpose. Why not? It's like, well, you've got one.
You've
whatever.
had one
You don't have to look for one. It's right in the front of our face. And the pain had purpose also once you shift your mind to this, that you've taken that. And I remember in this 10-day Hoffman Institute process I did.
Oh, I
and
know about Hoffman. Yes.
we stood up, and gave some insights that we had gained while we were there. And one of my closing remarks was, well, it's clear I've got to take the SHI and make some manure out of it. So even that has purpose.
Yes.
And that I was the last to know just how much purpose that has, that's all to be used in my own development. That is to be used in my own salvation, my spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. And that shifts everything, though, from that's such a problem, that's so awful, 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 and then spending the rest of my life awfulizing it. Versus saying, I've got to look at this and get a different framework around this. And yes, painful. Yes, unpleasant. Yes, indeed. And yes, it had great purpose. And that integration is, I think it's what I call what you're referring to as you say you look back on it. And that when you look back on it with some integration, it doesn't carry the same kind of weightiness. It doesn't carry the same torture. Until it does, like it does, until we get it integrated.
That is the exact right word, the integration, because, and I think in unity, which, I was ordained, as we said many years ago, what I see people doing also is either living in that past, over and over, or ignoring the past, and everything is the isness of the allness of the oneness, and they're dying on the inside. And so they're what's been so important for me in my ministry, which is why this is called Authentic Spiritual Journey, not the perfect looking spiritual journey, is that there is an integration of this knowing God is everywhere present. God is present in me. And how am I to live that goodness, that grandness in the world, given this other truth? And so that is the process. I think it's integrating what we know to be true spiritually, and also, it's like a reviewing of the past with that renewed perspective, but not just pretending it doesn't exist. I mean, sometimes there is therapeutic work to do. Sometimes there is a new physical practice to do. Sometimes there's, breath work. Sometimes there's just grief work, crying it out. I did not get a childhood, or I didn't get my teenage years because I was, caring for my sick parent, or whatever that is. That has to be grieved so the new can come forward. And I think that is really the work. That is it. The work of integrating what we know spiritually. And then as we start, bringing that into these life experiences, some brand new awareness appears that's grander than, what any church, quote unquote, teaches. It's a true God experience when we can integrate at that level.
Well, and that there's been no absence of God through it all.
Exactly.
It was our own naivete and our simple binary system of filing that was formed from a 3-year-old's mind that says, when I get what I want, God's present in it. And when I don't get what I want, where was God in that? Right. And it's like, until that's opened up some to say, wait a minute, that's a 3-year-old's interpretation of where God is present or where God is not, AKA when I get what I want. And then when I don't get what I want, then I'm going to be traumatized by it, or I'm going to have a tantrum for the rest of my life over not getting what I wanted, versus accepting growing up and having some clear understanding of there'll be times I get what I want and there'll be times I don't get what I want. And, you can't even listen to music anymore, once you make a devoted commitment to apply this, to live this out. So then, just as I was saying that song about unanswered prayers, came to my mind. Like that God's presence is in unanswered prayers, just like God's presence is in answered prayers, because God knows what we would pray for without ever thinking about whether that's true or not, whether that's what I actually need, and praying from a place of what I think I need and what I think I want, instead of what do I actually need and want. So it's the deepest of surrenders, and it can be very, very scary until it's
Very scary.
until it's freeing, until it's less frightening. It's often very, very, very scary.
Well, you're right. And, honestly, over my journey working with people, I've, mentored with several people who work very deeply in the spiritual realms. And honestly, my idea of God has been blown so many times that it's been scary in the moment. But what I know is, as I sit with it and move through it, that I then can integrate all I have known as well. So, and that is exactly the work as you're describing it. And that actually reminds me that we spoke about this the other day, and it's been on my heart lately with things I've been drawn to read and music I've been drawn to listen to. Is, my journey has almost come full circle in terms of my connection with Jesus, in terms of the way I think about my spirituality. And I wondered what's been up for you in your journey about that, because you spoke about surrender, and it was a real surrender piece for me on this journey I'm on.
Well, it's I would describe it similarly as a full circle. I watched a Netflix series called Voices of Fire. And it's about a choir that was developed over in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Pharrell Williams produced it, and it's 6 little episodes of that. And I felt like I had a conversion watching that. Now, I don't know a key from a chord from a note musically, literally. I have no clue about that. But this was developing a gospel choir. So 3,000 people came in there to audition, and they sang things like Jesus Loves Me, The Great Redeemer, and these songs that meant the world to me as a child. And things that I got through scripture from reading, from things my little Sunday school teacher used to give me assignments to memorize every week. And I love doing that. And I had cellular shift from that. And this has returned me to the roots of that. And it's a new relationship with what I had moved away from, and not out of a casting it out. It wasn't out of this ain't for me.
Oh, no.
Or anything like that. It's just having run in a different arena, being in a different arena now. And it's like that root system, though, was growing in me all this time. And it's a return to that, even to speak in terms of Jesus and what would Jesus do, and Jesus as a master teacher, and what would Jesus do in a situation like this, and other things. But that old gospel music is alive in my cells and is alive in my bones and blood. And it returned me to there, like I had my own revival. It sounds dramatic, and that's as clear as I can put it.
Oh, I think that's beautiful, and not dissimilar to my experience as well. I love that. I love the way you said the word revival. That's an important word, and I think because it brings energy, vitality into the spiritual journey. And I would say the same was for me. My experience with Jesus, was from the Methodist church. It was from the Baptist church. And even though I've spoken about, I always had this Native American, grandmother give me these, Native truths and teaching me these things. Of course, the predominant culture I grew up in was the Christian culture and the Christian school, and learning about John Calvin and all of those early leaders. And so as my journey developed, I felt like I always was connected to Jesus, but in a different way. And it was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was at a retreat in Arizona, and it was with Richard Rohr. And I am not somebody who's followed Richard Rohr, but people have really loved him. And so I was trying to see what the big deal was with Richard Rohr. And so I thought, I'm going to go on this retreat. I get days to do it, and I really need a break and a retreat. And what the learning was not actually from Richard Rohr. He says what Unity has taught for over 100 years, but because he's doing it from a Catholic perspective, it's mind-blowing to the Catholics. But what I did get from that time there is we were talking about Jesus one day, and there was an image of Jesus on the cross, which, as you know, is a typically Catholic image. And I've heard a lot of people in New Thought and Unity say, oh, God, I don't want to see Jesus on the plus sign. And, they've really minimized it and stuff. And I don't want to see blood and guts. And I don't want to, I've heard that a lot. And it always felt a little strange to me. I didn't really know how to respond. So just let it go. So at this retreat with Richard Rohr, we were talking about that Jesus image, and I was looking at it, and I was talking to people at the table, and there was a woman sitting there knitting that was in the, how there's always one of those at a retreat. And she would say the most deep things sitting there doing that knitting. And I said, well, what do you think? I said, I know you've come a long way in your journey. What do you think about this image? And she said something really simple, like, I think it means he suffers with us. And I just started crying right there. I said, oh my God, that is yes. And I got this view back through my entire life of every hardship. He was there, he was there, he was there, he was there. So it completely transformed any discomfort that I felt like New Thought was trying to give me with my Jesus. And I finally started coming back out of that. And now it's like a love affair I have with Jesus. It's also very personal and private. I don't talk to really anybody about it. I mean, this is I guess I'm coming out of the Jesus closet right now. but my daily relationship is about that. Some of the music I listen to, I have this, this incredible sense of awe and worship at the same time, trying to embody that Christ. That's what he called us to 100%. But I now, anytime I see a Jesus image, I'm thinking about what must have the artist been going through when they painted that Jesus on the cross, or what, so yeah, my Jesus relationship has come full circle, but definitely much more expansive than it was before too. A much greater understanding.
Well, it's out of the closet now through this podcast, and I can tell you that I refer to it as Jesus as my boyfriend. So we're both out of the Jesus closet, and the only pictures I had in my office for years was pictures of Jesus. And with the irony of it, like how this deep relationship that I've had with this leader, this way shower, this brother, this Christed being, and how little I would talk about it. So keeping it in the closet is an accurate description of it, and it never took it away from my experience. And then Richard Rohr, now I've teased now that I've got a threesome going with Richard Rohr and Jesus. And it's because of how I've been able to use these teachings and the writings through Richard Rohr, specifically that universal Christ. And
the
then
idea of universal Christ.
Breathing underwater, if you want to get practical about it, from what an addictive mind and addictive thinking can do, that writing of breathing underwater has been like lifelines to this.
Oh, and yeah, that's an amazing book.
That little Netflix series I referred to, this kid got up to sing, and she sang Jesus Loved Me, and she could not sing without bawling her eyes out. And that is what it's about to me. It's one thing to sing a lyric. It's another thing to feel a lyric. And it's another thing to have a relationship with the message, which is Jesus loves me. Yes, he does. How I know. The Bible told me so. The Bible tells me so. So it's one thing to say it and sing it, and it's another thing entirely to integrate and embody that. And that could be, the simpler it gets, the better it gets.
Yes, yes, yes. I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, and as usual, this has been spiritually feeding for me every time I talk to you. And I hope our listeners, I'm sure they are applying this to their own journey and thinking, wow, where am I, with all this in my journey? And I think a key to any of what we're talking about is time to explore the spiritual journey. We can't be plugged in every second of the day and do deep spiritual work. We can't be overscheduled every second of the day and do our spiritual work. We've got to set time aside to, as the scriptures say, go apart for a while. You got to get some time to dedicate.
Well, I want to encourage that too, of course. I also want to encourage an application of this with our eyes wide open. Like, listen to songs, listen to lyrics, feel lyrics, listen to what you're reading. Don't just plow through a book and throw it on a shelf. Like, here's another book I've read. Like, have a relationship with the teachings. I opened one to read yesterday from Pema Chodron, and the first chapter in it, welcoming the unwelcomed. How to welcome the unwelcomed. And the first chapter's name of the chapter is Start with a Broken Heart. Begin with a broken heart. And it's like, well, that's enough to slam the book closed and sling it out the window. Or use an image like Jesus on the cross to say, there's suffering included here. And I've been trying to sweep it under the rug or dance around it or avoid it, and it's not effective. So I've got to do something a bit more grown up now.
Yeah. And I often say this show is or my ministry is for the spiritual big kids, because we've danced around it long enough and know the only healing is to be right in it. And you can be in the middle of your workday and do integrative work. You don't have to go on a retreat for 3 months. Or sit and chant the Om and go to yoga. You can be in your business suit in the office, being mindful about what it is you're doing, having a couple of deep breaths between phone calls, working with an image, having a touchstone, that you work with to bring you back to center. There are myriad ways to work this spiritual awareness, I guess, as you go throughout your day. I know you and I are quite busy people, and I don't always have 3 hours a day to do it. I get up extra early to do my spiritual work, and it extends through the day. So
that's the key,
important.
I think, honey. Yeah, is to meditate with our eyes wide open.
Absolutely.
And then close them when you get a chance. And don't wait for that chance to close your eyes to meditate, by all means. And that could be a fun show, one to do about these best practices, and things like, even with our families, waiting for a question before we come in with our opinions and advice, and talk about simplifying our own lives, like not to say a single word today until somebody asks me a question.
Yeah, let's do that on our next show. Let's do our next time we have you on, spiritual best practices. I think that'd be a great show.
Yeah, well, it may not be popular, but it'll be good for us.
Yeah. All right, dear friend. Well, as always, it's a blessing to have you on. I know you've got a lot going on right now. You're also doing a lot of speaking and coaching. You're working with boards virtually. I know you're not traveling right now. Anything you want to tell our listeners about coming up that's happening for you, or how to find you? I know your website's...
MarthaCreek.com. And my email's there, the number's there, the list of things that I've got going on are there. It's a varied approach to what I'm doing. I record anything I can to put it out in the world. I live a mission to serve those who serve and to get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet, which is why I'm here today, and to uplift anything that you're about, honey. So they can contact me directly right through that website and get a list of anything that's going on.
That is awesome. Well, I'm glad you're staying home. It's so much more grounding than doing all the travel. And I know family is important to you, and you're around some family and being able to do that. So I love that that's your life now, and you're still super supportive of so many people, ministers, and organizations. So that is great. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And to our listeners, thank you always for having us along your journey. And we're always honored to share the day with you in a little time. And again, listeners, if there's something we can do to support you better, please reach out, send an email. We love feedback. We're open to feedback. And we also love to know, is there some big way we have made a difference in your life and world? We'd love to know, because then we'll do that more. So let us know how you're doing. And as always, thank you for your support. We did meet our $9,000 in 90 days goal. So that is amazing. I can't thank you enough for your financial support and your love. So thanks again for listening, dear friend, and blessings on the journey. We'll see you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2023, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Thank you for listening to the show today, dear friends. I'm always happy to have you along the journey. If you're seeking deeper work, though, I'm going to invite you into one-on-one coaching with me. In my coaching work, I get to glean from my over 30 years of experience of working with individuals and leaders in the community on their spiritual journey. So I have a wealth of information that will help you along the journey, and it will be supportive. It will be supportive of your dreams, goals, and desires, but it will also be confrontive, because I am going to help you confront those limiting patterns and beliefs and help you break through those aspects and move into looking at life in a more holistic way. So even though it will be confrontive and at times even challenging, you will learn to grow, you will learn to prosper, and you will evolve into the person you have always wanted to be. Friends, the answers lie within you, and I am so honored to help empower you to live that truth and that goodness in the world. If you want to learn more about coaching with me, simply go to CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to the coaching section for more information. That's CynthiaAliceAnderson.com and go to coaching, and I'll be happy to set up a one-on-one call so we can discuss how I can best support your journey. Thanks again for joining me today, dear friend, and blessings on the journey.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.